And art is politics for me. You mentioned we're from a political and artistic family, and they are very entwined for me. So I like things that make a mark politically. Ancient art was once contemporary.
Of course.
Modern art was once contemporary. Today's art is going to be, in the future, passé in some manner. So it's always holding a time. And as long as you're true to your time, I think that is political.
How do you think Satish Gujral evolved right as a child of partition, you might say, in some way?
So the first thing that happened to him was that he was taken everywhere with them. That included, during the partition, being jailed with his parents. That included moving from place to place. That included being on the burning trains for the partition, moving people, being in refugee camps. All these were very, very strong impact on a mind that was very young. My father-in-law was once, somebody came in and he said, they were trying to buy something. And they said, Gujral Sahab, it's so expensive, it's so expensive. So he looked at them and he said, you're not paying for the paper. You're not paying for that line made in charcoal. You're paying for my reputation. My reputation of working for 70 years on an idea.
Greetings. Welcome to all to this new episode of Delhi Diwan, which is dedicated to art, especially the visual arts, and which is sponsored, like all Delhi Diwan shows, by the Gujral Foundation. It is my pleasure to welcome a very eminent figure in the Indian and international art world, Mrs. Feroze Gujral, who, apart from her own very interesting, I would say, multicultural origins in Hyderabad, I believe your father was half Malayala and half Yemeni.
No.
Or something like that. There was
I have two grandmothers who are not Indian and two grandfathers who are very South Indian, so strong South Indian.
And a Hyderabadi mother.
Yes.
And Feroze Gujral has made a great name for herself as a patron and sponsor and facilitator and mecene in the visual art world. And we're going to be talking about her current and past activities and what, in her view, is happening in the art world. To give a more complete introduction, I should, of course, mention that you belong to the famous Gujral family, which is illustrious both in politics as well as in culture and arts. It was my privilege to know both the late Prime Minister Inder Kumar Gujral, who was the uncle of your husband, as well as the father of your husband, the famous artist Satish Gujral, and his wife, who received me a few times at their home. Therefore, I was able to see him at work on some of his creations, and I kept a lasting impression of his enormous creative ability, as well as his humility, his gentleness, all the features that characterize a great artist and a humanist. As far as you are concerned, I have seen and heard you speaking about your dedication to art and the role that you want India to play in the contemporary art world. The Gujral Art Foundation is not dedicated solely to the work of Satish Gujral, but is really providing a platform and a facilitation mechanism for artists both in India and abroad. Could you tell us what you are currently doing and what are your principles and the methods of your action?
First, thank you very much for this introduction. I love an introduction about me. It always sounds better. And it sounds more like one can see some of the things one has done. So thank you for that. Thank you for having me on the show. I think there's a lot of work done. It's our 18th year. We started in 2008. It was a gift to our father, Satish Gujral, on his 80th birthday. So we were, in 2005, he was 80, and we were thinking, oh, what do we do? And we were just trying to find a gift that would make him happy. And I think this idea of starting a foundation to give back to the arts was very important. And we had seen over the years many people approach his studio, him, for small funding, for framing works that they had for a show or for a travel grant. And we incorporated all these things that were missing to create a foundation. when we began, there was a gap in the art world. There was no place and no space for the alternate. So whether it was contemporary dance, whether it was sound, whether it was light works, whether it was the theories of art, whether it was a philosophy, whether it was practitioners getting a place to actually come to and explore, all of that was missing. So we started very on a very edgy note with a space called 24 Jorbag, which was kind of a broken down, half-made sort of house, which was experimental, but very exciting for the artists, very exciting for us. And we did a multitude of projects there. From that grew a demand for funding a lot of things outside ourselves, so large platforms, the Kochi Biennale, the Columbus Scope. We are headliners for 10 years for Columbus Scope, which is an art festival in Colombo. Many awards, many grants, many travel grants, and a lot of scholarships. So it kind of extended into multiple things. We're also very focused on doing India Pride projects. So something that brings pride to the country, which is abroad somewhere. So from the very small to very large international projects, I think all of it is exciting.
Right. I mean, people often think that if you are in the art world, especially in India, you must have a gallery. And you have been careful to point out that you are not a gallerist. You do something different, right? I mean,
Yes.
how do you proceed usually in terms of promoting artists and facilitating their exposure?
I think we're very focused on the giving, very focused on it being 100% charitable, philanthropic endeavor. So Mohit and me are both professionals. Me coming from an Islamic background, I also have a kind of a practice of giving X percentage of all that you earn. So I think these two things, plus coming from an artist family, knowing how difficult that journey is, how difficult it was for Satish to come at the Partition and multiple times have no funding, have no material, have no platforms. We were very conscious. It's unusual because we're from an artist's house. We're not just a foundation giving to the arts. We are from inside out. So I think that led us to be very specific that we do not want to be commercial. We do not want to exploit the artists for anything. So even when we do a show for them, we produce, we introduce, we do the opening, we do the catalog, we do everything. We don't sell or buy their work, and we don't take a work from them either. And I think that's what's appreciated over time. People do appreciate that we're 100% philanthropic organization.
In general, what are your criteria for selecting artists that you want to highlight and support? Do you have any preference in the medium, in the technique, in the style, or is it just a matter of personal predilection?
Honestly, it's very personal. I think over the years, I love collecting and I love curating. And I do work with some of the best minds in the business. I do a lot of study, a lot of work to understand what is trending, what is not trending, where are the gaps, which artist needs to be seen. Sometimes it's performance. It's got nothing. We did a huge performance thing many years ago in 2011, 12. And that was because we were watching Rosalie Goldberg in New York create Performa. Performa was and is the greatest performance arts festival in the world. So I felt that was missing. Or we decided to work on a project with light because I thought nobody's talking about light. And light is very much part of a lot of practices across the world. Or sound. We did a beautiful project called Queen Size, which was about, a gay couple. It was all in dance, beautifully done, banned from being shown. But we showed it at the space and it was very well attended. It was very well remembered for being able to have the freedom of what art should be. And art is politics for me. You mentioned we're from a political and artistic family, and they are very entwined for me. So I like things that make a mark politically. I like things that make a comment on our time. I like cultural content to every project we do. So it's very much heartfelt, it's very much internal, but not without all the other good advice from across the entire practice, and artists and curators and writers, and I'm always studying. So
in other words, you don't have a permanent, except for that house in Jorbag, which you have used, I think, for quite a few years for this purpose. Otherwise, you use other spaces, right? For example,
yes.
temporary spaces like the Kochi Biennale, the Muziris Biennale, or other places both in India and abroad. I know you have done things in, for example, in the Wallace Collection in London.
Yes.
And in quite a few other places worldwide.
I feel internationally we're, like I said, focused on the Pride projects. So Venice came out of a conversation which was an artist had written a letter saying India's never present and we should do something. And we decided why not? We would just do it. So I think Venice came very much out of making sure that India has a place at what is the Olympics of the arts. And for many years we haven't. I was very pleased that this year we do. We now have, I hope, a permanent pavilion. But that time we didn't. So yes, it was a pop-up space. We took it for 9 months. Grand Palazzo on the Grand Canal.
Yeah.
Because I was very conscious that this is India. And people are not going to remember my name or the foundation. They're going to remember there was something from India. And I didn't want it to be small or misrepresented or, not being able to be grand. We are a subcontinent and I wanted that grandness. So that was one location. Shanghai was another fantastic location. We picked, when you go to Shanghai, there's a massive chimney and it has the temperature of Shanghai. So we were looking for a space and the chimney was attached to the exhibition for the Shanghai Biennale. So we explored getting it and we were very lucky to get it and we did a fantastic project in the chimney. So we do try and pick locations which are kind of dynamic. In Delhi, we've had something I call the toilet, which was not meant to be called the toilet, but I kept referring to it as a smelly place. And the artist took that title and printed everything saying the toilet. It's in Mehrauli. It's a very nice, big, like an old factory. So it has that derelict look, which I like. Jorbag was iconic. We had Meherchand, my office. I started something called the G spot there. Everybody laughed, but it worked.
You're being provocative.
It was the good spot, the great spot, the Gujral spot. And that we did, we would every Friday have an open house for an artist or a writer or anybody with an idea. And we have a drink and whatever. You get chips and Coke or you get momos and coffee. So we had that. We now have a new space, which is the home you've been to of Satish Gujral. So we inherited it a year ago. And my husband has repurposed it, restored it actually. He's an architect, Mohit. And he has restored it. So it's our new home for the foundation. And I'm very excited because it has the history of Satish. It has the history of Mohit growing up in that house and being an architect. His mother, who was a ceramist.
Yes.
Gujral Gujral. So it's kind of come together very beautifully. And we've just begun with our first exhibition, but it's some place which I hope will become our next iconic place for Delhi and the artists.
It's certainly full of history because Satish Gujral created his works there for many years, and he had this kind of space of peace and, sort of self-collection and meditation. So it's very important to keep its purpose and to, at the same time, continue having it as a shrine to his memory as well, but also something where the activity is taking place, not just a dead repository.
It has
but-
this spirit. I hope it has
Right.
a spirit.
Yes,
Which
yes,
would be nice.
yes, indeed.
Yes.
Yes. And Delhi is changing so fast that you want to keep some things as they were, 30, 20, 50
Yes.
years ago.
Yes, absolutely. It's a 70-year-old house.
I, come back to what you said about art being political. Now, that of course is controversial because now there is often a tendency to remark that art sometimes uses a political message but doesn't always bother to be a pleasant, uplifting, and entrancing or enthralling. And there is more of the focus on shocking people, which is what you see a lot. And I think this tendency, which began probably in the early 20th century, there is, or at least it's the impression of many, that there is a reaction against it and that people want to go back to something more aesthetic and not necessarily always making a political point, which may or may not be controversial. What do you think about that? Do you think we're going back towards a more aesthetic era? I see a lot of that in India, where you see a great deal of blend between modern techniques and traditional subjects, and how this in general shows a tremendous care for the very aesthetics of it, the very, refinement, the very sort of the enchanting aspect of art, which is after all what people originally thought art to be, something that wouldn't necessarily convey a specific message, but would by itself be an escape and a subject or an object of meditation and wonder.
I must agree with you. There is a shift back, but I think you've brought up many points, so it's an exciting thing to respond to. I just want to say that I think people forget we are a very old civilization and a very young country. And they slot us as a very old country. We're not. We're multiple little countries put together, and we're just 70, 80 years old. So there is always going to be the traditional, because that's our language, whether it's the script, whether it's our taste, whether it's our culture of that state, or it's our belief. All of it comes together through the arts. So I think there is always a movement in the cities and in these art schools to kind of look west. Our art history is mainly based on the Western eye. But having said that, there is always the traditional line. So there are two schools of thought. One is that we are too decorative, which means we are traditional, we are following traditional motives, there is a great sense of heightened beauty, and we follow that. And the basic Indian likes that.
Yeah,
so,
craftsmanship. Yeah.
Yes, craftsmanship. So when you see that, everybody likes that kind of art. That is what sells most, and which is fair. Then you have the other side, which is the schooled art, where you have thought, conceptual art, theoretical art. You have the message bringing, point of, but that is also important. There is no writing or art or poetry or music of a time that does not tell you that I am in this time. How do we know about the Greeks and the Romans or any great sage, the Vedas? It is of that time. So I think it's important to note that ancient art was once contemporary.
Of course.
Modern art was once contemporary. Today's art is going to be, in the future, passé in some manner. So it's always holding a time. And as long as you're true to your time, I think that is political. I think if I talk about this time and I talk about these issues, whether it's climate, whether it's, coronavirus, whether it's anything, must also be portrayed in our books, in our music, in our writing, in our art. If it is not, then it all becomes a blur. And then there'll be no markers for history. And art, architecture, design, music, all of it marks time. That's how you have a historical narrative of a culture. So I feel like a lot of the art is beautiful, it's being repetitive, and it's traditional. That's great. It has a segment, it has a word, it is craft-based, and we deeply revere that. But you can't call all of that art as well. And I think that's where there's the divide, in my mind. I like the arts to be more progressive, tougher, saying something, even if it's a great sign of beauty, saying something. Like you, I miss the painting. I just came back from a trip, and most of my exploration were museums, great museums with great art from the past.
Right.
And it still pulls you so strongly. It is still where you learn from. You cannot become a contemporary artist without having learned about the masters.
Absolutely.
It's like you can't learn to sing if you don't know the alphabet, right? Or you can't write unless you've studied to read and write in the first place. So I think this is key to who becomes an artist now. And now the crisis is everybody thinks they can sell.
Absolutely.
So
And
everybody is just making something to sell.
yeah. And those who become famous think that because they are famous, whatever they do, it will still sell for a high price.
You know, there's a small anecdote that my father-in-law was once, somebody came in and he said, they were trying to buy something. And they said, Gujral Sahab, it's so expensive, it's so expensive. So he looked at them and he said, this work is not, you're not paying for the paper. You're not paying for that line made in charcoal. You're paying for my reputation. My reputation of working for 70 years
right.
on an idea, on something. That is what you pay for. You don't pay for this 2x2 piece of paper. That's not what anything. Anybody can make a 2x2 piece of paper. What you pay for is the reputation of the artist. That is what people don't perhaps get all the time. They don't understand why it is precious, And the arts is the highest form of being human. It is the highest. Poetry, creative arts, music. You can't replace that. You can't replace a voice or a great... I know you had a podcast on traditional music and, between Europe and India. And I thought that was a very good point to show the lineage of the millennia that takes to make a composition and why it is so special compared to something made yesterday on a contemporary, electronic soundboard. So, yeah, there is a shift back. And I think it's coming on time because the new generation needs it. They need to look back.
Yes, and I think one thing that we probably have more or less lost in the last 100 years or so is a sense of symbol. You see, not that symbols are not inexistent, you find them everywhere, but when I talk about symbol in art, I talk about the ability to encompass some transcendent truth in a particular motif, whether it's painted or whether it is sung or played on an instrument. And this is what I think made art such a powerful and such a divine occupation, because it gives people a sense of what is hidden behind appearances. And I think that is what we always look for in art, including, let's face it, in contemporary art. Unfortunately, in some contemporary art, as you know, there is often a sort of nihilism, that there is nothing there. There is no spirituality, there is no spiritual tradition like what ancient masters were sort of brought into. And that, of course, since you brought the topic back also to your father-in-law, to your late father-in-law, who you held at the Jaipur house at National Gallery of Modern Art, a very masterful exhibition of his life work. And I must say it was quite a treat because it was of global, as they say, world class. It was so comprehensive and so well displayed. It showed that India has really come of age as far as staging exhibitions. But one thing that I wanted to ask you had to do with your own research and study into Satish Gujral's art, because it's very interesting how he literally traversed the century. He was almost, it was 95 when he passed away. And part of his formative experience, apart from Lahore and Mumbai, was in Mexico, revolutionary Mexico with Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo and Siqueiros. And you can see very powerful echoes of that period, the sort of the Mexico of communist artists who were sponsored by Rockefellers and that sort of thing. And that leads me to ask you, how do you think Satish Gujral evolved right as a child of partition, you might say, in some way, that is all the suffering and the break, the sense of collapse of a particular life at a very young age in life, and then rebuilding a life, and from the very exotic experience of Mexico, coming back to India and integrating in some way very different traditions. How do you think that evolved throughout his life? I know it's a long question, but you can certainly answer whatever part of it you wish.
I think because you knew him also, I think you have framed it well, because it's a personal question also for you to know. But I think when we were getting ready to do the centenary exhibitions, we started to re-look at all his life's work. And my great regret is I didn't have enough questions for him when he was alive, because to us, he was a grandfather, an elderly person, somebody who was always working,
always
till the very end, and always forward thinking. So he never looked back much, and he talked a lot about the past, but his work was always progressive. So I think at the very beginning, to be deaf at 8,
yeah.
And have a life at that time which was a bit restricted because of that. But he had parents who were lawyers, freedom fighters, activists. So the parents were very, very motivated in their own life. So the first thing that happened to him was that he was taken everywhere with them. That included, during the partition, being jailed with his parents. That included moving from place to place. That included being on the burning trains for the partition, moving people, being in refugee camps. All these were very, very strong impact on a mind that was very young. He was also a fantastic reader. He only knew one language when he went deaf. And by the end of his life, he knew 4 languages with 4 different scripts, could speak in all of them well, could write beautifully in languages he's never heard. So there was so much of imbibing at the time. And he was always with adults because they couldn't leave him anywhere. He was always with adults. So his learning was always adult. The first things he ever had were books on poetry, because his mother loved the poets. And he grew up with poetry. So he was always very, I think, had a higher search for what is hidden, as you said. What are the subtleties in the arts? I think his initial education in Lahore at the Kipling School of Art was very important, because it also taught him craftsmanship on multiple materials, which is why he can explore later. It also taught him draftsmanship, which is why he could become an architect later, because he knew how to draft. Now, people forget these things. People think you can just do these things from nothing and nowhere. You can't. There is a learning. There's a lot of luck. I think he had a lot of luck. He got a scholarship to Mexico. He met the Mexican ambassador and he said, "We have a scholarship. Why don't you go?" I mean, to be so young, to take a 3-month journey on a boat with $5 into the void, you can't hear, you can't speak.
Yeah, I mean,
he still managed to get 2 girlfriends on that boat and managed to get to Mexico. And at that time, he was very young, he was very idealistic, and that's why I say politics and art, because he was very taken up by, Castro and Che Guevara and Frida Kahlo and Siqueiros and Tamayo and so many, Diego Rivera, who allowed him to work on one of his murals with him, that he became very aware of the artists in the place of nation building, and the artists in the place of culture, and the artists in the place of history making, because he could see all of it happening, very robust at that time in South America. And he comes back to India, and he's very lucky that he's discovered by a critique at that time. And then he's discovered by Pandit Nehru at an exhibition. He discovers Kiran Gujral, his beautiful wife, who was 15 years younger, but he sees this young artist and he falls in love with her. And each one brings gifts. Everybody brought something to his life that enhanced it. So Nehru was building all the buildings around India Gate. And he was also doing his portrait at the time. And he went with him to see the buildings, and he was like, there's nothing on these buildings. Why are they not decorated? So it allowed him that first chance. And he's the only artist to have 5 major buildings around India Gate with very large murals. I think people pass them and don't know what they are, you know. You see Baroda House with the great peacock. You see the High Court with a huge 60, 80-foot mural. You see Sanchar Bhavan, you see Shastri Bhavan, you see Vigyan Bhavan used to have.
And
a massive...
Moria Hotel.
The hotels, the Oberois used to have too. So there were hotels, there were cinema halls, there were universities. And he also has 2 murals in Chandigarh with Corbusier. So it's all these personalities that he meets along the way that he engages with. Who engages with him? So you have to have the talent, you have to have the hard work, you have to have the luck. You know, I think all these 3 things anyone needs to be successful. So I think he was at a magical time of new India being built with a new voice, with a new idea, coming from South America, coming from New York and London. He stayed in London, he stayed in New York, he stayed in Paris for 2 years. So you're bringing a lot of awareness, a lot of education, a lot of skill sets. And you believe you can. And you do. So I think it was definitely his incapacity as a hearing and having problems with his health that forced his mind to be far more dedicated to making.
Yes, definitely challenges and difficulties in life can really in some way help you to...
it fuels you,
absolutely.
In a different way.
It gives you a tremendous resilience and ability to move, because his adaptability also, the way in which he was able to change his style so many...
He was always, he was never afraid. He was the most fearless man I have ever known. You know, post the partition, I think he felt there are no gods. There's only good and evil. And he believed everything you make, I make myself. There was a great urge to experiment. There was no fear. There were times of no money. There was the times of no work. There was nothing being sold, but it never stopped him. He could not contain a new idea.
Right. You feel that his art flowed out of him. It was like a constant need
He
to create.
didn't have a choice. He would just make the work. And very often I asked him, I said, you know, like, do you like this work? He would ask me, do you like the work? And I would say, not really. He said, no, do you like it or do you hate it? And I said, well, I hate it. And he would say, good. I said, are you going to change it? He would say, never.
Yeah, because at least the worst thing is to be indifferent. That means you haven't made anything.
That's exactly right. He wanted you to have a visceral, strong reaction. And if you didn't, he felt like, what am I doing?
That's a very apt and inspiring way to end this conversation. And I'm very grateful to you for having brought out so many of your own experience and also impressions and feelings about so many different things and about art in general. And I do hope that we will have other opportunities to continue this dialogue. And thank you once again for being on Delhi Diwan.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Com. Thank you very much for having me on the show.